couple more moments.
Cool. I got a notice about live streaming, so that's why I wasn't sure.
No, thanks. Yep, we're good to go now.
All right. So welcome everyone to the Pillar 2 AIB Advisory Board meeting. Very excited to be here. Hopefully everybody's staying warm on what's supposed to be the first day of spring, but feels a little bit more like fall or winter out there. I have for everybody, I've put the agenda in the chat. Today's conversation is going to focus really around our teacher preparation partnerships. So let's go ahead and begin with introductions from, I'll start and then we can pass it on. So my name is John Silke. I am an instructional specialist for secondary math in Montgomery County Public Schools and the chair of the AIB Pillar 2 advisory committee. And I'm going to pass it off to Christy.
Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christy Murphy Baldwin, Chief of Human Resources for Prince George's County Public Schools, and I am the Vice Chair of the AIB Pillar 2 Advisory Committee, and I will pass it on to Brian.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you guys. I am Brian King. I'm a principal at an elementary school in Charles County. And I will pass it to Patricia.
Hello, everyone. My name is Patricia Twitty, and I am an instructional lead teacher at a school in Prince George's County. And I can't see everyone, so I'm not sure who I'm passing it to.
Why don't you pass it to Joe?
Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Joe.
Hey everyone, I'm Joe Semenko. I am the Education Program Officer at the ABLE Foundation. I'm a former elementary school principal, and I am a board member on the Accountability and Implementation Board.
Joe, do you want to pass it to Dwayne?
Yeah, I'll pass it over to Dwayne. Hey Dwayne.
Good afternoon. I'm Dwayne Morgan, Senior Director for Education, Outreach and Pipeline Development at the University System of Maryland. And Nancy Shapiro and I are a team. And I think she was slated to be here, but she had a conflict. So you get me instead.
Well, we are thrilled to have you here, Dwayne. By the way, good to see you again. All those years working together at Stuff University of Maryland.
I know. It's been a while.
It has been a while. So this discussion is around focusing on the teacher preparation pipeline component of Pillar 2 and really thinking about teacher preparation partnerships with LEAs. And one of the topics that came up in our work around Pillar 2 is one, talking about the current partnerships that we have, and then two, thinking about some more creative ways that those partnerships could be improved. I think that, Christy pointed out that Maryland is an import state. So we are getting teachers from everywhere. And I think all of our districts want to find ways that we can improve, either growing our own or not searching so far and wide for teachers. So I want to begin with the members of the committee, if they wouldn't mind talking about any sort of established partnerships that they know of in their districts around teacher preparation. So any programs of Grow Your Own, any types of things that exist. So let's talk about current partnerships. Christy, I'm going to turn to you first, since as a chief of HR, I'm sure that you have lots of knowledge about those partnerships.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I was actually gonna let some other people talk to, or Brian, to see what some partnerships are. But yes, we have several partnerships in Prince George's County. We have partnerships with the University of Maryland, Notre Dame, Bowie State, probably maybe three others that I can't remember off the top of my head because I don't have it really right next to me. But those are just a few of them, and in various areas for various certifications for like ESOL, special education, early childhood. Prince George's County Public Schools is very unique in that we have our own alternative certification program. We're the only LEA in the state of Maryland that has that. So we have our own resident teacher program where we help people get certified in elementary education. And then last year we were approved by MSDE to do ESOL. So between that, we also have a partnership with Prince George's County, Prince George's Community College, to help our conditional educators earn their certificate and actually become a standard professional, and we actually pay for that. So we have a lot of different offerings. And then, of course, with our TAM program, or the Teacher Academy of Maryland, which comes out of MSDE, we do have lots of different alternative support systems and structures in place for our students to actually become teachers. So with the Maryland Leads Grant, we just started a new program with our paraprofessionals. So it is a very wide range, and happy to answer any questions about that, but that just gives you just a little bit of information.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah,
so much.
and I can add on a bit to
Yep.
some of the things that Christy's mentioning. Excuse me, when you talk about paraprofessionals and using the Leads Grant to transition them into classroom teacher roles, that's certainly something happening in our county as well. And I think you mentioned a lot of the universities that we have partnerships with. I do think one thing that's important to mention when we talk about the teacher pipeline and being an import state, one thing to keep in mind is the amount of conditional teachers that are in our state right now, and turning those conditional teachers into fully credentialed classroom teachers. So that's, I know, a focus of our county, both the supports that those folks need, and then financially helping with tuition costs and things. I do think that that's sometimes one piece of the puzzle that gets overlooked is, and it's related to the fact that we're an import state, that we end up filling teacher roles with a larger size pool of conditional teachers than I think is ideal. But how do we turn those folks into effective teachers?
Awesome. And Brian, I apologize. I am having a brain freeze. Which county are you with again?
Charles County.
Charles County. Thank you. Patricia? I know you're in Prince George's, but do you have other experiences or any other thoughts on some of the partnerships or even some of the challenges that you know of?
I do not have any other knowledge of some of the partnerships. I think our Chief Human Resource Officer did a very nice job explaining those. I did, and I don't know if this is data that we would have, but I do know that there's an increasing, it seems every year, the number of conditional teachers continue to increase, and the challenges with them getting a standard professional certificate also seems to increase year after year after year. So I don't know if Christy or Brian can speak to, if you all are seeing the same trends, throughout the county or in other counties, that it definitely appears that more conditional certifications are being given, and there are a lot of challenges to getting people to becoming fully certified or getting a standard professional certificate.
To piggyback off of that, I actually had a question for Brian and Christy. For the paraprofessionals that are becoming certified, is that mainly elementary, or is it also middle or high school that are getting certified in certain content areas?
I can go. So for us, it's across the board.
Okay.
It's not one group in particular. It's just as Patricia said, really, the challenge is the requirements continue to change. And that makes it very challenging. I've never been one to shy away from my own story, and that is I taught in Virginia for 20 years. And I have 3 certifications, but in order for me to become certified in the state of Maryland, after 20 years of experience and 3 certifications, I have to take 2 reading classes. So when you think about where we are, that we're importing 68% of our teachers into the state of Maryland, and you have people who are coming that are fully certified, and now I have to tell them that they have to go back to school to pay more money to take 2 reading classes, and they may have been an exceptional reading teacher in another state. That is very concerning. And that's one of our problems or challenges is that we have that speaks to Patricia's point. And Patricia, unfortunately, the reality is Baltimore City and Prince George's County Public Schools have always had the largest number of conditional teachers. I'd like to say, because we've been innovative in our approach to go outside of schools of education, because they too are seeing a decline in their enrollment programs. So we have tapped on resources of people who have degrees in other fields and working with them. So our numbers have been pretty much the same, and it's less than 10%. 90%, a little bit more than 90% of our teachers all have a standard or advanced professional certificate. So the numbers are relatively small when you look at our overall population. But to Patricia's point, we are now seeing that other LEAs are tapping into conditional teachers. So while Prince George's public schools in Baltimore City numbers remain the same, Montgomery County, Charles County, Anne Arundel, everybody else are now tapping in. So their numbers are actually going up. So it was a really good point, Patricia. Thanks for bringing it up.
And just if I could just add on one more layer to Patricia's comment about the difficulty of conditional teachers successfully pursuing that certificate. I think one thing that it's kind of a common sense thing, but it's worth stating, I think, is that you bring folks in on conditionals and they have to immediately do the full job of a teacher. And on top of that, take 6 or 9 credits, on a rolling 8-week cycle. So the challenges of the job itself, and then there's the whole other layer of pursuing the classes. I think the only other thing that this comes to mind for this discussion, and maybe Joe could chime in because I know he's got more knowledge on it than I do. I was watching one of the AIB meetings recently, and it came up when we talk about growing our own teachers in this state. I think it's called the Teaching Fellowship, or I don't know if that's the right term, but it was frustrating for me to hear that it's undersubscribed, that all those funds aren't being accessed across the state. And I know there was some talk in the AIB meeting about what credentials you need to have in terms of top 15 or 20% of your graduating class, and is the GPA 3.3 or 3.0. But I thought that it's such a sound program to say to students as they exit high school, this is a legitimate career, and we will launch you and we will pay your tuition. As a parent, I have a couple kids that are, we're starting to get into college searches, and that's a very appealing offer from the state. And to find out that we're undersubscribed, I think that's worth digging into.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'd be happy to build on this. And, I think Emma's in the call too, and she can maybe check me if any of my facts on this are incorrect. But the Maryland Teacher Fellow Scholarship was a component that was included in the blueprint, and there's 18 million. I don't know if it's initially $18 million, but it will grow to $18 million that is allocated annually for more or less full ride scholarships for individuals who are interested in teaching. So it covers the full tuition and the full room and board for each year of your either your undergraduate or graduate degree, as long as upon completion, that is 1 year that you will commit to working within a Title I school. So, you know, I think this is a tremendous opportunity for, you know, high school students that are interested in going into teaching. You know, I don't know across the state if there are high school students on a CTE track that like are, you know, have studied, you know, have done some of their high school coursework in, you know, either an early childhood or elementary ed or you know, secondary ed pathway that are interested in going into teaching, or even, you know, folks that you know, they're in their, you know, junior year of college, and they have realized, you know, through either a tutoring program that they did or a service project, or maybe they have just realized as they've gone through and they've kind of, you know, fuddled around and changed their majors, that really they've landed on education, and they want to work within, they want to become a teacher upon graduation. That's a point in which they can go through and apply to be accepted within this scholarship program. And it applies also to individuals who are, you know, if you attend a private university, you still are eligible for the scholarship. You wouldn't get the full tuition cost. It would be basically the equivalent of what you would get in tuition and room and board coverage if you went to College Park. But that could be applied as a subsidy for, you know, any private university that you were attending within the state. Now, I think that when I've talked to people about why this is undersubscribed, I think there are a couple things. For one, it's a new program. So I think some of this is like, even conversations like this, getting it out into the public, that this is an opportunity and things that people should be looking into, I think helps kind of spread the word that this is available for anybody who's interested in going into teaching. You know, I think we do need a more robust marketing campaign on college campuses and then just statewide to let people know that this is a scholarship that is available. And then there's also been some, you know, kind of early critiques just around the requirements in order to qualify for the scholarship. So, you know, written in the legislation, you needed to maintain above a 3.3 GPA. There was an SAT, a minimum SAT requirement. And, you know, I think some of those are things that are being worked through currently in a couple bills in the legislature to go through and eliminate, you know, a lot of schools that have gone SAT optional. You know, there's students that, you know, they wouldn't qualify just because they haven't taken the test. So that's, you know, something that's not, you know, that's not fair for those students. And then, you know, there's a lot of scholarship programs across the state where the GPA threshold is 3.0. So I think some of that they're looking to try to make the adjustments so that it's still a very, very rigorous standard, but it's a standard that's more in alignment with a lot of the other scholarship programs across the state. But, you know, I think overall, this is a huge opportunity for us across the state because, you know, for me, I knew in high school I wanted to be an educator. And this would have been amazing for me to, you know, to go, you know, basically on a full ride for, you know, 4 years of schooling at the university level, to basically end up doing what I, you know, felt like I wanted to, you know, what I wanted to do for my career. And I think any high school students or that are listening now, or, you know, parents who are on this Zoom call that have a student that is interested in education, or, you know, a college student or a graduate student that's looking to become a teacher, I think this is something that they can access, you know, currently that is currently undersubscribed, and, you know, we would welcome it because we need more good teachers across the state. So I don't know if Emma, you have anything else, if I was
So-
exactly at anything I said.
Joe, before that, I know Dwayne's patiently had his hand
Sorry,
up,
Dwayne.
so
No worries.
you're on mute, Dwayne. Oh, perfect.
Okay, yeah. So I was going to actually echo some of what Joe mentioned, but I think that Brian, you asked a great question. And I think this is sort of the early stages of this, but even as we think about the new legislation that Joe mentioned, and there are more opportunities for support, I think in terms of maybe an untapped resource, we should think about our community colleges, because places like Charles County does not have a four-year institution, but it has a wonderful community college. And I think that's the case across the state. So in terms of really recruiting people from within the community, I think making sure that all of these scholarship opportunities are available to students who are at community colleges is something that we should definitely strongly advocate for, because I think that's where we're going to get more of those students.
And before I go to Emma, I want to also, and I don't have the requirements in front of me. Joe, you mentioned Title I, attending Title I school, and I'm going to frame it this way. I think that is in a better direction than some of the federal requirements. For things like noise scholarships and others, they will say that you have to teach in a high needs district, and a high needs district is defined as having one high needs school. So for example, full transparency, you have people go to University of Maryland, get a noise scholarship for math and science teaching, and teach in Montgomery County, but they could teach at any school in Montgomery County because Montgomery County is defined as a high needs district because it has a high needs school. I think that definition is way too broad. But hearing Title I, and this is my math science brain going into me, there are not many high schools that are necessarily considered Title I. And so if we are trying to recruit math and science teachers to teach in high school, it doesn't, at least from the requirements that you mentioned, that scholarship wouldn't necessarily apply to them. Most Title I schools, and I would love to be corrected by those, most Title I schools that I know of are elementary or maybe middle. And so maybe Emma or others, when you're thinking about changes in legislation, considering broadening that as well to including high needs areas like math and science. Not that we don't need teachers to go into Title I schools or maybe defining it better. If you're going to elementary school, it needs to be Title I. Because I just think about the number of math and science teachers, and I'll just say this, in Montgomery County, you want to talk about where the conditional teachers are, that's where they are. And right now, there are openings currently this year, right now, this moment, there are openings in our schools. And so I'm thinking about if maybe adding some layers there so that those students could be interested in pursuing a four-year program.
I think that those are all really good points, and something that, as we continue to think about, that these could be really good implementation considerations moving forward. And that's something that the AIB will continue to monitor. What are the subject areas that teachers are going into who have received this scholarship? And just speaking to a couple of other things, in terms of the shortage or the undersubscribing to the scholarship, I think that was something we've heard about and knew that there was some concerns about the underutilization of the scholarship. So in the comprehensive plan, there's actually a couple of additional tasks and subtasks that are related to that, to understand the core reasons for potential underutilization of the Teaching Fellow Scholarship. So MHEC is tasked with actually reviewing the criteria for the scholarship to help identify the core reasons for why applicants might be rejected for the scholarship. And then they'll be reporting the results to the AIB, and also just, any other potential reasons why they feel like the scholarship is underutilized since fiscal year 20. And then we also have provided some more implementation guidance saying that, we would like for MHEC to provide technical assistance to potential applicants in completing the application. So those are some things that we've added so far, but if there are other things that should be added or, that we might want to consider in terms of implementation, we'd like to hear that as well. And these are all really good things to keep in mind moving forward.
I don't know the nuances, but Joe, I heard you say like if somebody was a junior or senior, they could apply for it. Does this apply? Could those pursuing their education requirements as conditional teachers apply for this scholarship? That Brian's shaking his head no.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I don't know if there's clarity actually on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brian, is it your
Yeah, and
understanding
please
that-
don't, no, yeah, well, you guys probably all want to play poker with me now, but no, please don't take my shaking my head no. That was a hunch that I made visible and
Okay.
nothing more than a hunch.
Okay.
So yeah.
No. I'll raise this, and Patricia, I see your hand, and then I'll go to Dwayne. What are the things I heard throughout, and I would concur, is the financial burden that is put on, especially those who have conditional licenses, trying to pursue. And so maybe there should be either an alternative pot of money, or have some of the pot of money that's going towards, I'm not sure how, but when you have somebody who is interested in going to teaching, that they are already in the classroom fulfilling a need, but need financial support to complete that certification, I'm hopeful the state can brainstorm ways to do that. I'm going to go Patricia, Dwayne, and then Brian. Patricia.
So I just have a question. I have actually two questions about the discussion. One, I hear, if you receive the scholarship, then you're going to teach in a Title I school. And I think that there's no debate that, that seems to always be the go-to, is to put new teachers or conditional teachers in Title I schools. So in the teacher prep program, are there strategies or classes, or I don't know what the word is, to support teachers with working within a Title I environment, beyond, the regular teacher prep program, but just something else to give teachers some additional support and putting them in Title I schools? Because I think that I've taught in a Title I school for 16 out of 20 years in education, but I do think that there are some additional skills that first-year teachers, or even teachers who are just coming into the profession, need when coming into a Title I school. And then my second point, back to what Christy said about changing the requirements, if I'm not mistaken, I think there's an additional praxis that new or conditional teachers have to take. So in the teacher prep programs, or even for conditional teachers, what supports are districts giving them so that they can receive these certifications? I know when I graduated with my master's and my undergrad, you had to pass the state required exams prior to graduation. I don't know if that's still a thing or not. But even so, like, what supports are districts giving to teachers who have taken praxis tests 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 times? Because they're not cheap. And if they're constantly struggling to pass the assessment, what additional supports could be lent to those conditional teachers?
So Patricia, really quickly, regarding the teacher prep content, I'm not sure off the top of my head if that is something that is provided in teacher preparation programs. I could look back into that. But I do know that as part of the blueprint, the State Department of Education is required to develop new guidelines for teacher induction programs. And part of those guidelines include addressing the unique needs of novice teachers assigned to teach in schools with high concentrations of poverty. So that's in the induction program. And then I'm just not sure about the teacher prep programs themselves. So I can answer that in part, but I can circle back and see if we can get any more information about the teacher prep programs.
No, I think that's fabulous.
Dwayne?
Yeah, I actually love that question. Or actually, I think it was more of a comment of what we need to do. Because I think that even in our programs, and this wasn't what my hand was raised for, but I love this line of discussion so much. Because I think that even in our programs that really concentrate on preparing teachers in differentiated instruction or culturally relevant pedagogy, I think that it might be worth us thinking collectively about those teachers in that Title I space, and how do we support those teachers ongoing. So I think that what you're describing is probably outside of what our programs are currently doing, but I think collectively we probably could put our heads together about those supports based on the expertise that's in the state already. So I think that's a wonderful idea to sort of, just for us to think through in greater detail. And I also wanted to go back to the marketing idea that was raised earlier and just comment about, I know that the MSDE has the $250,000 marketing money that's out there. And I'm wondering if there's any way, I don't know if anyone from MSDE is here, but if there's any way to really have an intentional connection of, this work that the MHAC is doing in terms of distributing the scholarships to that $250,000 marketing that the MSDE is already charged to do with the state. So I maybe making sure that those are all connected.
Emma, do you know anything about the status of the MSDE marketing campaign and where things are at with that?
Yeah, so we will be looking at that. That's certainly something that would be in their implementation plan. So, which is now posted on the AIB website, and haven't had a chance to dig into it completely yet, but I'm looking forward to reading more about that. And if you would like to read a little bit more about it, you're very welcome to also look at the implementation plans for all state agencies. So sorry, I can't provide more details off the top of my head about where that's at, but it's definitely there.
Awesome. Brian, I think you had your hand raised to follow up, and then Joe.
I will, yeah, if I could, I'll excuse me, and I'll keep my comment very brief because I do appreciate this conversation, because this idea of, we need more teachers, here's a pot of $18 million and we can't give it away. It's something that we really need to think about. Well, where are things not clicking here? Is it an awareness issue? Is it an interest issue? Is it a support issue? So I'm glad that it's being talked about, and I'm glad that the requirements are being looked at, because a high GPA does not necessarily translate to becoming an effective educator. And I think that, and I'm sure the folks that are looking at the requirements, a lot of scholarships are built contingent on your performance in college. So maybe you can get access to this scholarship initially with a 2.8 in high school, and you show up on a college campus and you show an exceptional focus and aptitude. In freshman year, you've got a 3.6 and you're on Dean's list. But you started with a 2.8. So do we really want to be screened? We're saying we need more, but then we're screening out so many potentials. It seems like we're creating a headache for ourselves, where I'm always of the mindset to give folks an opportunity as opposed to screening folks out. So let's create more opportunity. And if people don't live up to the commitment they made to us, well, then we're going to revisit what we agreed to. But initially, my thought is let's give more opportunity.
Joe?
Yeah, so this is maybe veering a little bit away from the teacher prep question, but I think really addressing the idea of teacher supply. But I'm wondering and wanted to hear from you all that are working at the ground level, like it's my sense that as word gets out to teachers, not just that are currently in Maryland, but from teachers from surrounding states that potentially could move and teach here, that kind of the information around the $60,000 minimum salary for starting teachers, the 10% pay increases, and then most critically, the 60% time. The idea that 40% of your day is spent collaborating with your colleagues and not, in front of a whole classroom teaching kids, that those are, I know from my time working in the classroom and working in a school, this was always something that, my teachers and I would salivate over, right? This idea that we could have more time to plan, to collaborate, to talk to parents, to make phone calls, to grow professionally. And, I wonder a little bit, seeing as though there's no other states across the country that have made this type of commitment towards, more time for teacher collaboration and teacher, professional growth. If, getting the word of that out, makes a difference to the retention of teachers and then also the attraction of teachers to Maryland and as opposed to some of the surrounding states. So, wanted to get your pulse on that, and if there's campaigns that are going on within the each of the individual districts to kind of advertise these as features of the blueprint that are unique features for the teaching force within Maryland, and if we've seen any movement in terms of people, who were considering leaving now deciding to stay because there's some new, there's some new benefits that didn't exist prior to the blueprint.
So, Joe, I will speak to the financial increase. I think, coming from a southern state or a state where new teachers aren't going to start making $60,000, it sounds really exciting. I'm sure you'll see the campaign, and then you move to Maryland and you start to discover that you can't really find a decent place to live that you're not paying $1,500 to $2,000 a month just to be able to, rent and live in a decent neighborhood. And so I think while it's better than where we were, I think it's so many other factors at looking at someone. Yes, you're fresh out of college and you're making $60,000, but my rent is $2,000. I still need to pay for, grad classes, or I'm buying stuff from the money is better, but I think that there needs to be other partnerships within the state for, affordable housing for teachers in decent areas and decent neighborhoods. Maybe there's a trade-off. You have to tutor some kids or something. So there's more wraparound services with that. Do I think it's making progress? Absolutely. I do believe educators can make decent money and have a decent living. But I do think, especially in Maryland, as a person who migrated here, those were components and pieces that kind of caused me to readjust some things because it is so expensive to live in this area. I think as far as we're concerned, as a person who's still school-based, very much so connected to the classroom, the 60-40% sounds wonderful, but even with the teacher shortage, how much of my 40% is going to be taken to cover a class for either a substitute shortage or a teacher shortage. And so I think those things are all kind of connected, right? So it sounds good on paper. Yes, I'm teaching 40%. And then it's, oh, but so-and-so is out today. So can you go cover that class for 2 hours? And then this, and so how much of that 40% am I really going to have to develop professionally, plan, collaborate, and all of those things?
Really great points. Brian, I think you were first, but yeah, you go. Well, you go ahead, Brian. We'll go to Dwayne.
You good with that, Dwayne? I think you beat me on the clicking the icons. You're good with it. So my initial thoughts, I agree with what Patricia says about monetary incentives for folks, but I think the most ambitious and the most promising aspect that you mentioned, Joe, is the time aspect of 60/40. Because I think we know that generally folks leave our profession because they don't feel supported, which I think is code for I'm not having the impact I thought or I wanted to be able to have. So I think the time dynamic of the blueprint, education, this is a service-minded profession. And generally, the better teachers we've all met in our career are folks that really what they wake up to do is to impact kids and have relationships with other service-minded professionals. And so if time creates more space for those relationships and for talking about how we impact kids, to me, that's going to be more of a driver for folks to stay in the profession than the money. Now, the money, it's an acknowledgement of the difficulty and the intensity of the work that we do, but it always seems to be the headline, but I would encourage a conversation where it's the byline. The headline is the time, and you're a service-minded person, and what time lets you do is build relationships and impact kids.
Dwayne?
Those are my initial thoughts.
So yes, thank you for the reality, bringing us back into reality there, Patricia. And I appreciate your comments. I have a question for the HR directors, this whole notion of teacher shortage, and the reality is that a lot of teachers leave our classrooms, and some of them are very, very good teachers. So for the HR professionals, do we have a sense? I mean, maybe that's a rhetorical question, but I'm actually being serious. Are there people who have left the classroom that we know, like, of who might come back if we have the support? Is that sort of the data, any of that kind of data that the school systems actually keep track of? How do we reinvigorate those people who have left the classroom with all this new energy that the state has sort of developed and all these interventions to help the teachers? How do we maybe capture some of those teachers who have resigned to come back into the classroom? Because we know that there are lots of them who are out there who are doing other things besides being in education. So is there a mechanism that we have for re-identifying those individuals who would be, perform very well in our school systems, but who are no longer teaching?
Part of the blueprint, I think those are really good questions, Dwayne. Part of it includes a consideration for providing or creating a exit survey to be implemented statewide for teachers who are exiting the classroom. So it's just under consideration that the state shall consider designing and implementing a statewide exit survey, because I think that that's done at the LEA level now. So using a tool that would be used statewide, but I would think that some of those answers could potentially come from responses that are built into that exit survey, and what, if teachers can share, yes, would like to stay, but here are all the factors that are keeping me from pursuing this vocation anymore. So,
Christy, I wanted you to jump on Dwayne's question.
So I apologize. I have not been feeling well to everyone. So it's just like I had a coughing hiss fit.
Oh,
So
no.
just get myself back together. So could you repeat what the question was? I apologize.
So is there a mechanism by which we can identify those teachers who are no longer teaching, but who had very high reviews, and that we could actually, make it a point to actually try to recruit those, actively recruit at the state level, like some of these people back into the classroom?
Well, I think that that's an interesting question. So from a process perspective, every time someone leaves a school district, we do exit surveys. However, we are not allowed to give out their public information once they leave. But what I am finding is, and our new competitor that we have to think about there are a lot of private companies that are starting that are allowing teachers to teach remotely, and contracting with those, and that they don't have any other responsibility outside of that. And that is what I can tell you, that many of the people who are leaving, and I just came back from a conference, AASA, and I was approached probably about 5 vendors who can guarantee to fill all my vacancies, because they have a number of teachers who are willing to do this work, but they work for this company and they are remote. So at the same time, the district, then I would still need to hire a paraprofessional or someone to actually be in the classroom while the teacher is teaching. And we are finding that many are going there. And I think that is something that we need to start looking at, because it's a different competitor. Because that's honestly, they're not leaving the profession as much as they are looking for innovative ways to teach. And I can tell you several of the districts in Maryland have contracted with these companies and are filling a lot of vacancies.
I would imagine with more dual enrollment, that'll be even, more popular going forward.
So this has been an awesome conversation. I'm aware of the time. We have about 9 minutes left. One of the things that I think that the point about the time is really an important selling point, Joe, and I'm glad that you raised it. But Emma, I put it, to Patricia's point, there need to be some guarantees that time is protected, because already teachers planning there without the extra time. When you have one planning period a day, those planning periods are being asked of teachers to, will you cover for this? Will you cover for somebody who's not there? And candidly, when the conversations have been in the Twitter sphere about people saying, we need smaller class sizes, we need this, we need that, my honest counter says, okay, we need more teachers. And sometimes it becomes a chicken and egg thing. If we are going to give more time or less time to teaching in the classroom and more time to doing all these other things, that means we need more teachers to do that. So I think that, how do we find that balance of, well, we need to achieve, we're promising the 60% for the blueprint, but if we don't have the teachers there to do it, how are we going to really have it happen? And the last thing you want to have happen is somebody sign up being promised this 60%, and then all of a sudden they're not getting it. They're going to leave within, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And so I think we need to be careful on how that's playing out. Patricia, I really liked your point as well around the housing situation. I know in Montgomery County, the county promised extra money for housing for first responders and others, and I have advocated that our county council include teachers in that. Just a small anecdote, I know that We live in downtown Silver Spring. My daughters wasn't a Title I school, but had a high farms rate. They were considered a focus school. And many of our best teachers ended up leaving over the 5 years my daughters were there. It's because they lived so far away. And so they would go, they would get cheaper housing in Howard County or Prince George's County or elsewhere, or some of them would be living as far as Frederick. And they didn't want to do the drive all the time, as much as they loved working at the schools they were working at. And so I do think that that's some other creativity, which I know in of itself is not part of the blueprint, but we need to make it a connection to other legislation or other efforts around recruiting teachers. So I think that those are some really important things to consider. The other thing that I just want to point out is, and I put this in the chat, it looks like that the teacher scholarship is available for teaching assistants, but it doesn't necessarily use the term paraprofessional. And it says that if you're a teaching assistant for at least 2 years in a Maryland public school or pre-K school, you could apply for the scholarship. But I think using a term paraprofessional or something like that and really better defining that would be helpful. No, I think that this has been a great conversation. I know one thing we haven't touched on here, but with some of what spurned the conversation, Dwayne, to be honest, is that our committee has heard, I'll call them rumors for lack of a better term, that MSDE is very open to multiple different pathways of teaching. I know Christy has an alternate pathway and others, but even beyond just the norm and having all these different pathways to teaching, which impacts then why would somebody, Christy talked about somebody would go work for another company. Why would somebody go the more traditional teacher prep route when they can go these other alt programs to end up teaching? So I know that's something else that is part of it. I want to open up to the floor for the last 4 minutes. Anybody have any final thoughts, final words that they want to share? Brian.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll try to keep it brief. I know I've spoken a bit tonight, but just on the topic of the 60-40 time dynamic that we've been talking about in the last 10 minutes, I do think that that one thing to be considered, even if, let's say the blueprint, maybe it wasn't 60-40, we all learned that ratio. Even if the blueprint said 85-15, 80-20, 75-25, that would have got everyone's attention right away. 60-40 is so ambitious that I think it's worth considering. Is it so ambitious that it strikes people as unrealistic? And in other parts of the blueprint, we have these phased in targets with public and private providers in early childhood, Pillar 1, it's certain ratios over time. And I wonder, is this 60-40? Is this just overnight this happens, or is there a phase in? This is the long-term target. And first we got to show we can do 80-20 first, and then then let's do 85, let's do 75-25. Like, this is something we're working towards, or is this just we flick on a light switch? I guess it's just something that I get torn with the blueprint is sometimes you can be so ambitious as to strike people as unrealistic.
So I will just say my closing comments or thoughts is I consider myself an educator. I can teach you how to line dance. I can teach you how to do math. Like, I am an educator, and I often feel there's an art and a pedagogy to being an educator. Like, we go to school and we learn how to do our craft. And I think sometimes we forget that in this teacher shortage. And I think that's kind of how we got here in the first place, because everyone is not an educator. And just because I have a degree in math or a degree in science does not make me an educator. And I know there's a shortage. Trust me, I know. But I think that we have to hold our profession to the same esteem as doctors and lawyers and aerospace engineers and everything else. And we have to value and see ourselves in that value space, right? Like, we're educators. That's our calling. That's our profession. That is what we do. And I think sometimes a lot when we have these conversations, you can't just pull anybody into educating. And you have to have a passion to wake up every single day and do, educate, whether 3 or 4 year olds or grown high school students. So I just think that's the piece for me. Like, this is a profession. It's not something that we can just find a whole bunch of different ways to get people in it, because none of us would want to go to a doctor or to a lawyer with the things that we do to try to recruit teachers.
Thanks, Patricia. Other final thoughts, Christy?
I think I definitely appreciate the conversation. And I have kind of transitioned our school district from the term of saying there's a shortage. There's no shortage. We're in a crisis. A shortage implies that we're going to replenish. And if we don't start doing something that's drastically different to meet those expectations like we do of our doctors and lawyers, and re-envision how we do education, we are going to be having the same conversations 5 years from now. And in all fairness, long gone are the days when people work really hard for 10 months and then they get the summers off and then they get to participate in professional development and grow. The reality is we have people who want to do this work, but as Brian said, they are full caseloads, subbing for other people, and then they're learning their school, they're learning their county, and then they leave in the evenings and they have family, and then they go to classes at night. And then we want them to have a work-life balance and show social emotional learning supports to our students. Like, we have to teach them, we have to protect them as well. So how do we maintain those high standards, but re-envision how we do schooling, re-envision how we do education, because people want voice and choice. If the pandemic didn't do anything else, it taught us that I want to protect my life and my time. And I think that we have to respect that and figure out how to do this differently, or else I don't know what's going to happen to us. So I appreciate the conversation and the opportunity and space. And I look forward to, continuing this conversation to be that first state that just does it drastically different. And have people get that love. You can hear it in Patricia's voice. You can tell, even without seeing her face, she loves to teach. And that's gone because of all the things we put on their plate and then expect them to just great. So Brian and Patricia brought up some valid points, and I look forward to just continuing to figure this out together.
Awesome. Let's see. Any other final thoughts? Joe, you want to add anything?
No, just thank you everybody for all their time and engagement and work on this.
Fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for meeting, and for those who are watching this on live stream. Thank you, Dwayne, for representing the system and coming in and engaging in our conversation. I'm sure this is going to be a topic in the future, and that we'll be reaching out to the system of Maryland to come back and have more conversation. I hope that everybody has a relaxing spring break that's coming up in a couple weeks, that everybody gets some downtime. Christy, I hope you feel better and are able to get some downtime. And I look forward to our team coming together and having another robust discussion. So thank you, everybody. Dwayne's ending his spring break, but thank you for being here, Dwayne, even though you're on your spring break. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful evening, and I look forward to more conversations with Pillar 2 in the future.
Thank you all.